Hey YouTube, and welcome to the master guide on how to improve your tracing in Fortnite. I recently made a video on how to aim better on PC, and one of the most popular comments on that video was someone saying that their aim is decent, but their tracking is bad. So today, because of popular demand, I'm going to go over how to improve your tracking in Fortnite. For those of you who don't know, tracking is being able to keep your crosshair on your opponent while they are moving around. Tracking is super important in Fortnite because a lot of the guns in the meta right now require you to spray your opponents and will reward you if you can keep your aim steady and on the enemy at all times. Today we are going to go over how to improve your tracing. The video will be broken down into 3 main parts with timestamps in the description if you want to jump between sections at any point in the video. First, I'll go over how to optimize your settings and find the right sensitivity. After that, I have a few pointers to improve your real-life setup to enable you to track opponents. And finally, I'll show you how to best use each gun to spray down your opponents quickly. All you have to do from there is practice, and I will give a few quick ways you can do that as well at the end of the video. One last thing though before we start, I want to quickly say that some tips that I talked about in the previous aiming video may be repeated here because I think they are very important. But I tried to include as much new aiming advice as possible. So, with all that being said, let's get right into this. Okay, so first off, we'll go over the best settings and how to find the right sensitivity. When we are talking about changing settings, the number one goal you should have when adjusting your settings is getting the game to run smoothly. Based on what hardware you have on your PC, you may not need to change your settings much at all. But since I can't go over every player's PC specs right now, I will give you a few general tips to make your game run more smoothly. If you want a more in-depth guide, my full guide to aiming better will be linked in the description, and I go over settings in a little more detail in that video. Okay, so now I'll run through quickly the best settings to get your game to run smoothly. For window mode, always play on full screen. For your resolution, ideally, you want to have it as high as you can possibly go, so set it to whatever your maximum setting is. For example, mine is 1920 by 1080, as you can always come back to change it later if your game is still running slow. The reason you want a high resolution is so that you can precisely see the other player's models, and you can pinpoint enemies out. If you play on super low res, enemies can start blending into the surroundings, and it can be hard to distinguish enemy players. For your max FPS, set it to whatever your monitor can output. For most people, this is 60 FPS. A common misconception people had in my last video is that more FPS means smoother gameplay, but that's not always true. If you have a 60Hz monitor, which is the standard on most laptops and cheap desktop PCs, your screen will only be able to output 60 FPS, so even if your graphics card can output 200, it won't make a difference. And actually, it is better to have a smooth 60 FPS on a 60Hz monitor than it would be to have, say, 100 FPS on a 60Hz monitor, because you can get a lot of screen tearing, which will definitely make it harder to see other players. So long story short, cap your FPS at 60 or whatever your monitor can output. Since all we are worried about in this video is getting your game to run smoothly, you can set all the added visual settings to low. Make sure your motion blur is turned off, and you're all set for the game tab. In the game settings tab, there is one sort of hidden setting that greatly reduces FPS, which a lot of people don't actually know about, and that is record replays. Recording replays greatly lowers your FPS, especially if you have an old PC, so turning this off should give a serious FPS boost. Okay. That's all for settings now. Now on to finding the right sensitivity. Sensitivity really comes down to personal preference, but there are a few important guidelines I can give to help you figure out what sensitivity works best for you. To start out, whatever you decide picking for your sensitivity, you have to stay consistent. I know I fell into the trap of constantly adjusting my sensitivity, and all this does is sabotage your muscle memory and will make it really hard to aim. The best thing to do is to pick a sensitivity and stick to it. This will allow you to build up some muscle memory and will noticeably improve your accuracy. Also, as a general rule, when you move your mouse all the way from the left end of your mousepad to the right end, you want to be doing around a 360-degree turn. This will make it so that if you have your mouse in the middle of your mousepad and you get shot from behind, you can turn around completely and do a 180 without having to pick up your mouse. When talking about tracing your opponents better, one of the biggest reasons people struggle with this is because their sensitivity is actually too high. Tracking involves small, precise movements to follow the opponent. If your sensitivity is too high, it can be really hard to move your crosshair smoothly, so try lowering your sensitivity just a small amount and see if this helps your tracing. Alright, now on to tips to improve your real life setup. If you want to track players well, you have to have a nice mousepad. I've always been a proponent of big cloth mousepads because I find you can make a lot more precise movements on them, but regardless, make sure you have a mousepad. Bigger is definitely better when it comes to mousepads because if you have a bigger mousepad, you can afford to drop your sensitivity more, and you'll be able to make small precise movements as well as great long sweeping turns. For your mouse, try to get a name brand mouse such as Razer or Logitech. Using a cheap mouse won't do you any favors. Also, make sure your setup is consistent. Try to limit all other factors around you that could be affecting your aim. One of the best pieces of advice I've received that has helped me improve my tracking a ton is always make sure your elbow is being supported by something. If, when you are aiming, your elbow is hanging below your keyboard and mouse, it is going to be really hard to be precise with your arm movement. If your chair has an armrest, try to use that, but in general, you want to keep your elbow level with or above your mousepad. That way your arm won't be jittery and you can smoothly track your opponents. That is about it for settings and setup, so now let's talk about tracking with different guns. Being able to trace your opponents in Fortnite is going to improve your aim with all weapons, but there are 3 guns in particular that, if you can track opponents well with, they can make a huge difference in your gameplay. These 3 are going to be the sort of automatic weapons that Fortnite has, which are the SMG, normal AR, and suppressed AR. First, with all the weapons, know that crouching will greatly reduce the spray patterns and make it easier to trace enemies and hit your shots. The SMG is fairly simple to trace people with, because you will rarely use it from long range. This is because the SMG has no first shot accuracy, so it is best to use this in close range fights. When you are shooting with the SMG, I found it is almost always better to just hip fire the weapon. When you are in close range with this thing, there is no need to aim down sights, because it doesn't lose much accuracy if you aren't aiming down sights. The AR and the suppressed AR are fairly similar. Both are strong at medium range, and whenever possible, you should try to crouch and take advantage of the first shot accuracy with these weapons. The difference between tracing with the SMG and the ARs are that the ARs are wildly inaccurate when hip fired, so I really can't think of a situation, besides if you are just trying to break down a wall, when it's best to hip fire the AR. With the AR, you can fire for about 15 shots before you have to worry about the spread getting too big and missing your shots, but tracing with the suppressed AR is a little different. This weapon greatly rewards firing one shot at a time, because the first shot accuracy resets so quickly. The important thing about the suppressed, though, is that after less than 10 shots, the spread will start to get super big. In general, with the SMG, you can fire a full clip of it without having to wait for the weapon's accuracy to reset. This is different with the AR, though. With the AR, you can shoot around 10 shots before I would stop and let the accuracy reset. And with the suppressed AR, I would try to shoot in rounds of about 5 shots. Of course, I could dedicate a whole video to talk about how to use each one of these weapons most effectively, but hopefully these tips help give you a pretty good basis to help you hit more shots and trace enemies better. Lastly, let's cover how to practice tracing. I've said this many times because I think a lot of people get this wrong, but I really would not recommend practicing aim with external programs. The best way to practice tracing is practicing inside Fortnite, because external programs have all kinds of different settings and factors that don't replicate aiming in Fortnite. The best way to practice aiming, in my opinion, is by picking up a weapon in the pregame lobby and finding someone to just track with your crosshair. You don't even need to shoot for this to be worthwhile. Just practice keeping your crosshair on someone. You can also set up a number of playground drills to help improve your tracking using bounce pads and all sorts of other methods, which I will link in the description because many people have already made videos on this. Another easy way to practice tracking in-game without having to spend a bunch of time setting up a drill is just by picking a small target or object and move around while keeping your crosshair on it. Just doing this a little bit can help, and there's no need to waste a ton of time doing these little exercises. At the end of the day though, if you want to truly get better at aiming, you're going to have to go fight other players and use weapons in real time. Try to pay attention to why you are missing your shots. Think about what you could have done better to hit your shot. Did you spray too long and let Bloom take complete control of your aim? Were you impatient and didn't make sure you used first shot accuracy? Whatever it is, focus on what you can control and think of what you could have done differently to come out on top in that situation. Alright, That is all for this video. Like I said earlier, if you need to go back to review any specific part of the video, there are timestamps in the description. Please do let me know if there's something I missed or something else you would like to see me cover in a future video. As always, if you did find this video helpful, please do leave a like and consider subscribing if you haven't already. Feel free to leave any comments as well if you need help or have any feedback, and I'll see you all in the next one.